Hello and welcome to today's live talk, 5 Steps to Implementing Patrol-Led Deployment. My name is Noreen Charlton and I am new to Skydio as the Senior Manager for Public Safety Marketing. I've spent the last several years in the reality capture space as it pertains to public safety applications and scene reconstruction. And before that, I spent just over a decade with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department as a crime scene analyst. I am incredibly excited to be joined today by some of Skydio's industry experts, Fritz and Deepu. Guys, if you can please take a moment to introduce yourself to our webinar guests.
Sure, I'll start since my picture's first. And welcome to the team, Noreen.
Thank
Our
you.
first webinar together. And it's kind of cool they have two people that everybody knows by their first names, I guess. But my name's Fritz Reber, Head of Public Safety Integration at Skydio, coming up on 4 years, believe it or not. Obviously spending every day talking to public safety agencies, learning how they use drones and making sure that bridge of communication between Skydio and the customer stays open. Before that, I was a police officer with the Chula Vista Police Department. I spent 27 years there. I retired as the patrol operations captain, number 2 position behind the chief there, Roxanna Kennedy, whom many people know. Worked closely, was the UAS commander there. Took over from Vern, who actually started up the team. Vern Salee, who's over at Axon, a good partner with us. And when I got all of the team, I got sidetracked with drone as first responder. So spearheaded that with Cape Termes, who's now at Skydio. So the two of us are working together again. Spent a year in retirement standing up and working with Chula Vista to develop drone as first responder, writing the waivers, helping with training, getting launch sites, etc. So really understood the value of thinking about how to deploy drones differently, which we'll talk about today. So after about a year doing that, came over to Skydio and happy to be working with people like Deepu, who's done some good stuff, and you too, Noreen.
Oh, still muting myself. How you doing, everybody? My name is Deepu John. I'm a solutions engineer with Skydio. I've been with the company, actually today is my 2nd year anniversary with Skydio. I've been here for 2 years as a solutions engineer. So I work on the pre-sales side, doing technical validations, proof of concepts with our customers. Prior to that, I served 20 years in the New York City Police Department. I was assigned for 17 years, 13 years of which I was assigned to the Technical Assistance Response Unit, the TARU unit, where I was a detective. That unit it's interesting because it's kind of like an incubator for new technologies within NYPD. So we get a chance to research and develop new technologies and kind of implement it and send it out to the rest of the department. So it was a great place to work. And in 2017, I was tasked with researching and building out the NYPD's UAS program. I was the project lead for that. So, looking at equipment, helping develop SOPs, helping shape the policies, things like that. So incredibly lucky to have been involved in that program, which is still running strong. Over 30 pilots within the tech unit that fly drones on an everyday basis with NYPD. So yeah, happy to be with you all and share some of the experiences that I've had that hopefully can be helpful for everybody.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Wealth of information here. So really excited to see what you both have to share with everyone here on the webinar. Before we dive in, though, I do want to cover just a few housekeeping items. First and foremost, the question that everyone wants to know always, this session is being recorded, and you will have access to the recording through Skydio's Airborne Insights. Secondly, if you have any questions or comments throughout the session, please feel free to drop them in the chat. I will be here to monitor those, and we will have time to go through the Q&A at the end of the session. We want to keep this as informal as we can and kind of just chat through these 5 steps that we have identified to assist your agency in implementing a patrol-led deployment. It is no secret that recruitment efforts are falling short and many agencies are understaffed. On the other hand, crime isn't magically disappearing, and officers are increasingly being expected to do more with less. There are expectations and often promises made to communities to respond to calls faster and decrease the use of any potential use of force or any other critical officer related incidents. Drones are undoubtedly a force multiplier and offer numerous advantages when it comes to enhancing officer safety. They can obviously cover large areas more efficiently. Now I look spooky because I'm in the dark. My lights are back on. Um, they can cover large areas more efficiently, and they can assist in crime prevention efforts. The concept of patrol-led deployment is the foundation for the future of drone as first responder, which is otherwise referred to as DFR. And today, we want to help educate agencies on implementing a patrol-led deployment. So patrol-led deployment begins with a UAS, a drone, in patrol vehicles, and then it allows for more immediate aerial intelligence when responding to calls. While I worked for a large metropolitan police department, it is not lost on me that most agencies do not have access to helicopters or an air unit to provide that situational awareness and that additional tracking from above. However, drones are making it very possible for every officer to provide that same situational awareness and tracking with the easy deployment of a drone in the trunk of their vehicle. Additionally, streaming integrations allow for all stakeholders to see what you're seeing on the drone, whether that be a real-time crime center or a dispatch center or any command staff back at the station. With multiple eyes watching that live feed from the drone above, there's a better communication to all of the officers responding on the ground, and then agencies can gather valuable real-time intelligence. So now that I've kind of laid the foundation for why it's important to start implementing patrol-led deployment, I will pass the 5 steps off to the experts here on the call, and we will start with step 1, an assessment of your operational needs.
Yeah. So this is a good place to start, and I guess maybe a good place to begin this is to look at what's the alternative to a patrol-led deployment, right? What's the other paradigm, and really the other paradigm is more of like a centralized deployment where you have an expert team of expert pilots that are assigned to a unit that will be called out for a drone response, for overwatch at a hostage barricade situation or a search and rescue or whatever it is. And there are drawbacks to that. One of the drawbacks to that is that the response times get much longer, right? Because the patrol unit has to get there, assess the situation, realize that they need a drone, and then call out the drone unit. And the drone unit, it takes more time for that drone unit to get there. So there's that big time gap that can be filled by this other paradigm, which is a patrol-led deployment, which is that there is a drone in every officer's car, and it's part of your patrol kit. It becomes part, just like everything on your duty belt and everything in your patrol bag. The drone just comes with you every day when you go out on patrol. And what the benefit of that is that it reduces those response times. As soon as you get to the scene, the officer realizes that there is a drone that's needed, and they get that drone in the air right away, which reduces that time in the air to get that aerial perspective. Reduces it greatly, and really increasing and unlocking a lot of value out of that. So getting back to assessing your operational needs, if you're starting out a drone program, the best thing to do is just start to look at what gaps you're trying to fill by including or implementing drones into your operation. Is it search and rescue? Is it an overwatch at hostage barricade situations? And kind of use that to develop a concept of operation. Fritz, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think a little background on the patrol-led, because you explained it perfectly, both of you. But it might be a little bit of nuance that is important to call out. everything's relative, right? So this is kind of related to DFR, and DFR was kind of unique in that it was a different way to deploy drones. Speed is, like you were describing, speed is everything. So how do you position a drone to get there as quick as possible? DFR obviously is the ability to get a drone there before people, which is really tough to do. So agencies are, how do I get their drones? How do I get the drones on the scene as fast as possible? We kind of learned about the importance of speed with tragic incidents like Columbine and stuff, where these incidents, initial officers would just sort of secure the scene, call in special weapons and tactics. These are advanced teams like you were talking about, like Taru, or experts in really a wide range of tools that aren't deployed to patrol officers. And Columbine showed that in this day and age, we can't afford to wait for those specialized tools and equipment. So essentially, we brought SWAT to the front lines with equipping officers with advanced weapons and giving them active shooter training. And we're seeing that in other tools as well, tasers and everything. If it's not there in the first minute, sometimes it's not valuable, and that's what people were starting to see with the value of drones. So DFR kind of showed, hey, it's not just the type of drones that you have, it's how you deploy them. And so historically, that it was either DFR and drone of the trunk, and then we realized that drone in the trunk could describe both a specialized team as well as a patrol-led deployment. Actually, the first agency I thought that really got it, they actually coined the term patrol-led, was Oklahoma City, led by Captain Jason Bussard, supported by Sergeant Dax Laporte. They actually did a really good drone responders webinar on this with Charles Werner. So it's worth Googling that and listening to that hour long, because they went over 6 different incidents, which were amazing. 3 of which were officer involved shootings where they had a drone overhead in the first minutes of the incident. And that's the intent of the patrol lead. And patrol lead specifically means when you're forming a team, you're choosing to put the drones in patrol, not based on the person's skill set or their desire to fly a drone, but where they're working and when they're working, so that you have a drone in the first minutes of an incident up in the air, providing visual feedback, not only to the pilot, but ideally over a streaming solution, so that command is seeing it, responding units are seeing it. You're getting a common operating picture. This type of speed can't be done when you're staffing it with someone who's a specialized team, or maybe on an air unit or something, where they're experts. They're able to have a wider variety of drones. They're just going to be 30 minutes to an hour away. So, and most agencies, I think, ideally would do both, just like you have, active shooter training and a SWAT team. Agencies like New York can do both, and Oklahoma, big enough to do both. That's what was so unique about them, that they intentionally just picked people out of patrol, trained them, gave them a drone that was easy to use, quick to deploy, easy to unfold in their trunk, not something large that would take 2 people to manage, and basically said, hey, your job, your primary responsibility upon arrival is once you secure your safety, is get that drone up, secure the scene, and it just made it much more scalable. So a little more background on patrol-led deployment as opposed to other type of deployment, but we're going to go into talking about how to start a program, grow a program, no matter what style that you guys decide. But something to think about. Do I want it to be a specialized unit? Do I want it to be patrol-led? Do I want to do DFR? Those are 3 different types of deployments that really make a big difference.
And I think you made a very good point there, that it doesn't have to be exclusively one or the other. A lot of times it could be a blend of both, where you do have drones in the hands of some expert units, like crime scene documentation and accident scenes, where they're going to use it for those niche use cases. But the majority of the patrol officers will have the drones for that quick overwatch use case as well. So it doesn't necessarily have to be one or the other. But yeah, I mean, getting back to the slide here is, like, really assess the needs, figure out what you're trying to use the drones for, and use that as a springboard to start developing a concept of operations, and really, like, distill that to the best, as best as you can, to really key points that you want to use the drones for, and develop how you want to start, developing a program from there.
Yeah, good point. Actually, that probably brings Noreen into the conversation a bit because, um, the fact that they're in everyone's trunks, they're going to find a lot of reasons to use the drones, right? And one of those would be accident scene reconstruction or evidence gathering. And so having them broadly deployed, maybe not teaching everyone every way of using a drone like a specialized unit would, but maybe picking some that would just do strictly accident reconstruction, others that might do indoor, others that might do situational overwatch, search and rescue, etc. I don't know if Noreen, you
Yeah,
want.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, there's a huge need for drones in the documentation space, whether it's for crash or crime. But really, what's interesting is as we go out and we talk to agencies across the country, or even globally, you realize that every department operates so differently and uniquely, and they always throw out a, wow, we had a scenario last week. It would have really been nice to have a drone. And it's a unique situation that we potentially didn't think of, right? And so there's just such a need and a place for drones in law enforcement. And then when you sit down and you think about all these primary use cases, you're going to find out that there are many ways that you can be using drones in your day-to-day use.
A little segue because they said we wouldn't have to stick to the PowerPoint. But there's been some interesting news. The FAA had some rulings where you can do a lot more under a certificate of authorization. And I don't want to get into a 107 versus a COA thing, but the ability to operate under a COA and basically do everything you need to might open up this patrol-led deployment model. There's been some fear people having to learn FAA rules and take the 107 and pay for the fee, and how do I keep 100 people in my agency all up to date through the FAA testing? Why don't I just all operate under a COA and just have internal training, and that would meet the requirements of a COA? And that as we see agencies considering that option, everyone's kind of not been brave enough to do it. They just sort of a CYA where they get their FAA 107 and operate under a COA. We might see agencies comfortable enough to say, hey, look, our training program is good enough. We're FAA sending a signal that they want us to be able to operate under a public aircraft operators authority, and that way you don't have to pay the fee and take the test every year, and it might be a lot easier to manage, and that way it'd be easier to deploy drones broadly, right? Here's a few drones, we'll train you up just on accident reconstruction or evidence scene collection. Here's drones for your patrol officers first on scene, who might have just a simple like an X2 where a Skydio X2 where they just in charge of getting it up in the air and getting the video feed for situational awareness. You don't have to be, every drone operator doesn't have to be an expert in everything. And so just as the industry and agencies are rethinking how they deploy and who does what, I think you'll see a lot broader adoption across every aspect of policing.
Yeah, that's a great point, Fritz, because the regulatory environment has changed a lot since back in 2017 when we were starting to develop our program. The Lance grid system didn't exist, and some of these quick authorizations didn't exist. So now, like it actually potentially makes it a lot easier for agencies to be able to operate under public aircraft operators, and be able to leverage all the things that come with that. And it's also something that you want to build into those concept of operations, kind of building out a game plan on how you want to roll out the program before you get to the next step, which is to start developing some internal champions. So if we can go to the next slide. And so this is, and Fritz can speak to this as well. This is probably the next big step is, once you have a good concept of operations, at least a skeleton of how you want to deploy this program, identify people within your organization that are in a leadership position that can champion this for you. Bring your idea to them, explain it, and get them to kind of buy into that and champion it and bring it up, to higher levels of leadership, because you are going to need buy-in. And we're going to talk about this in further slides. You're going to need buy-in from, everybody from community organizations or like higher levels of leadership. So you need somebody within your department that believes in this program and is going to take that journey with you to make it a reality.
I couldn't agree more. We're kind of biased, Deepu, because in Noreen, probably all three of us were champions internally. Not the only ones, but certainly take a lot of pride in driving forward the program. But I personally, I think this is probably the most important step, is to find that person or maybe a team of people who are going to be your directly responsible individuals, the ones that just are going to take ownership, or are going to insist on it and keep selling it and keep pushing it from below upward. And we're in the early stages of drone teams where, it's not something that's widely accepted, and city councils are funding it and demanding it of their agencies. We're still in the days of end users trying to convince everyone above them the value of it, and it's obviously spreading, and it's becoming much more intuitive and known in the industry as a value. But that's still going on. So I think, identifying, cultivating that internal champion. If you're a command staff or a chief or a sheriff who wants a drone team, it's, you can be your own champion, but if you can find someone below you, with the time and the energy to really, really drive it, it's going to ensure success.
Yeah, this is and that's a great point. And Fritz, you were a captain at Chula Vista, so you were the champion. For me, like I was a detective, I was way low down in the food chain, so it was really important for me and my team to get somebody in leadership. And for us, it was the commanding officer of Taru, who was Inspector Greg Antonson at that time, who we presented this idea to. We said, hey, listen, we have all these tall buildings, and when we're at hostage barricade situations, we have no way of getting eyes, in through those windows to find out what the situation of the hostages, what the condition of the hostages, the type of weapons involved, and things like that. We were relying on things like pole cameras leaning over, from high-rise buildings and hanging pole cameras down to see what's going on. So drones presented. That was like the initial use case that we came up with. The drone is basically a flying pole camera that we can bring up at these hostage situations, and we brought it to our commanding officer, and he loved the idea and he kind of embraced it. Like the old saying is, great ideas go nowhere without visionary leadership. And it was that leadership that kind of got the ball rolling. He brought the idea to our chief of department, who's the highest ranking member of the department, the NYPD at that time, and then to the police commissioner, and then to the mayor, and from there on. So that identifying that one internal champion, or those group of people that can help you really make this vision a reality, that's really, really important. And I'll let you guys take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely, to both of those. And then, the next step, once you've identified your internal champions who can help with, the whole idea of creating drone programs in your agency, the next thing is to secure your community buy-in.
So yeah, Deepu will probably have a lot to say on this. I'll start off. This was super important, obviously, at Chula Vista, because we were trying to do something different with drone as first responder. And I'm sure a lot of listeners have heard about Chula Vista, probably even visited it. They're pretty famous for putting on tours for not only the community, but agencies. There's probably been 100 agencies through there. But the thing I learned early, and I learned this from Vern Salee, who started the team itself before we even had I think we had a donated drone that was from a local power company, and we never even used the thing. It just kind of sparked off the desire to have a drone. And so they, went through the process of writing a policy, but the community outreach started from the beginning. They invited the ACLU and a lot of community stake leaders to come in and meet. And of course, our chief, Roxana Kennedy, you don't forget her if you've ever met her. She had the trust of the community, really knocked down the walls. She was the ultimate in champions in terms of driving through the drone. But and then maintaining that. We did a lot of community outreach when we were talking about DFR and drone as first responder. So not only starting the team, but moving into this unique nationwide sort of The idea of drones over your neighborhood in everyday patrol, not patrolling, but responding to everyday 911 calls was really unique. And the fact that we didn't have a lot of pushback was a testament to getting the community's buy-in. And as city council, everybody understood the value. They sold it. They sold the concept because it meant community safety and just maintaining transparency, providing feedback, being accessible to the public, answering their questions. They just felt like if there was ever a point where they had to pull a pin, that they had access. And so making sure that they always had access and securing community buy-in. And so anyone starting a team, that's where you start. You start by waving the flag saying, we want to do drone program. We want your buy-in where it's for you. Please give us feedback. We'll be accessible, we'll answer your questions. And that's in a small community at Chula Vista, relatively small, certainly relative to NYPD. So I'm sure NYPD's, it's 10x in most agencies.
Yeah, that was, I mean, when in 2017, 2018, when we were developing the program, that was a huge effort by the department to reach out to the community and community advocacy groups. And it wasn't an idea that we came up with. It was actually as a result of stories that we heard of painful lessons learned by other agencies that didn't go that route, that just decided to buy drones and just start a drone program. And the first time the community saw the drones in the air was at an active call out. And the reaction was very negative. They how come you didn't involve us in this process? And they thought it was being something that was done to them rather than something that's done for them, right? So the NYPD, we worked with the Police Commissioner's Project Management Office. We had people from legal. We had people from the Community Affairs engage with the New York Civil Liberties Union, other advocacy groups, city council, and we kind of, we brought this concept of operations that we developed, and we opened our books to them and said, this is what we're planning, and we want your feedback. And we were open to their feedback. And one of the things that helped out was that we kind of modeled a lot of our policy on established recommendations from the ACLU on drone usage. So we, by and large, kind of modeled it based on those recommendations. So we can just say, like, we took these recommendations and we built them into our, our ConOps and our SOPs, and that actually went a long way to kind of gaining the trust of the community. I mean, I don't think you're ever going to get, a warm hug and say thank you for bringing drones into the community, but there was, at least from the community, they understood that they were part of the process and their feedback was important, and that went a long way in securing that buy-in for the community.
And I'll segue over to Noreen on this, but if you feel or anticipate that there's going to be pushback, then start with some no-brainers like the fire department. Everyone loves firefighters, and there's obviously a lot of great use cases there, purely life-saving, and not a lot of the issues with privacy and things that come along with policing. But the easiest use case, I think, for everyone to see the value is accident scene reconstruction, evidence collection.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, transparency always builds trust with the community. And we're starting to get to a point where, people understand that there's not a whole lot of places you can go without being on camera somewhere. Certainly I worked in Las Vegas. You can't make a move on the strip without being on 100 different cameras at the same time. And people understand that and they almost expect that. But having those communications is what is the most important, because once the community realizes you're not spying on them, you're not looking in their backyard for no reason, but you're using it to increase your response time, to help with crime, to help, maybe get rid of these pursuits that are happening through your cities, or document these crash scenes faster so that they can get to and from where they need to go and the road isn't shut down. Those are the types of things that help them understand the benefit to their agency having drones in their toolkit. So once you've kind of assessed what your operational needs are and why you need drones, and then you've cultivated both your internal champions and you have secured your community buy-in, the next step is to tackle the paperwork.
Can we skip this part? That's boring.
No.
I'll let you take the first crack at this, Fritz.
Oh, great. So this is where, this is where your champion, I think, makes all the difference. And a team of champions, right? Every agency has several champions, and you'll have some that love to fly and others that love the processes and the recording. And then there'll be some that want to tackle the waivers and the SOPs and the training and certainly finding the directly responsible individuals for those and holding them accountable and making sure that the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted is super important. But I think you start with defining your con ops, obviously not only defining them in your head, but putting them down on paper, your standard operating procedures, your policy. Um, those are the things you want to get down early on. I think what was unique, not unique, but a good strategy was initially to develop a drone committee. Again, this was before I got on, but they developed a drone committee, assembled people, and their whole task was to write the policy, which was different than the operational protocol or the SOP, just the policy, like how you're going to respond, how you're going to treat the evidence, what you will do and what you won't do, something that explains to the agencies or the community that you serve that your mission and your values. And so craft that, get through that, whether it gets through city council or county council or whatever. And then once you're up and running, then establish a clear training program, a standard operating procedure for basics, and inevitably you're going to want to do some advanced operations, like the tactical beyond visual line of sight waiver. You'll be thinking or wanting to do drone as first responder. You're going to need beyond visual line of sight for this. We do work for Skydio, so every once in a while we're going to throw a pitch in for Skydio because we have a team that will help you with this. Certainly, definitely, if you've ever done it yourself, it's if you have the money, it's definitely worth the money because it's a lot of work. Yeah, and one other thing we haven't said is safety in numbers. Reach out to your neighboring agencies, reach out to those that are training nearby you, and exchange policies, exchange training manuals, exchange SOPs. Cops are great at cutting and pasting their safety in numbers. Don't reinvent the wheel. All the other sayings there's value in. So you want your program should look a lot like the others around you and have the same type of wording policy.
Yeah, those are really, really good points. The policy really is the key. We when we were developing the program, we met biweekly with a working group that included legal, community affairs, the police commissioner's office. Pretty much everybody had, a deputy commissioner of public information. Everybody was involved in crafting the policy, and there was a lot of back and forth. We just wanted to make sure that we get it right the first time. And then use that policy to develop SOPs and training curriculums and things like that. And like Fritz mentioned, you don't have to do all this yourself. There's a ton of resources available, especially now. Drone responders is a great one. Chief Charles Warner does a great job of keeping a huge vault of a lot of SOPs that you can get access to. Like I said, cut and paste. No need to do all this yourself all over again. But like Fritz said, if you kind of want to push the easy button, and you want to work with Skydio, we do have an amazing regulatory team that can kind of pretty much help you craft the certificate of authorizations, help you develop policies and training curriculums and everything pretty much that you would need to stand up a program. J.K. Stoltz, Jen Player, Brandon Groves, they're great at what they do. So, if you want to do press the easy button, you can definitely reach out to us and we can, we can help you out with that. But there are a lot of resources available out there. Don't try to do it yourself. Reach out to your neighboring agency, especially when it comes to developing training curriculums and things like that. Your state might already have training programs. For New York State has the State Preparedness Training Center up in Oriskany, New York. You can go up there, take drone training for everything from Part 107 to actual hands-on training, and it's all free. They'll even put you up for free at a hotel. So There's probably resources like that available in your state. So just seek that out and leverage it.
Yeah, thanks. I know you both kind of wanted to skip this slide, but I think this is the scariest part for everyone that knows why they could be using drones and want to implement a unit, but then they're like, oh, I don't know about getting all the waivers and the paperwork. So just, I guess our huge point here is there are many resources out there to help you. Don't get it to a point where you get to the paperwork and you decide this is too much work, we can't do it. We are here to help you. There are several resources out there. A lot of agencies just put their SOPs and their policies out on a simple Google search. You can find those on their websites as well. So a lot of things that you can look to there. And the final step in,
Wait,
oh, sorry.
Charles Warner would kill me if I didn't throw in drone responders. They have a large repository of policies and stuff like
Yes.
that. So, like I said, lots, like you said, there's a lot of resources out there.
Yeah, lots out there. And then the final thing in our steps are to choose the right equipment. You guys want to speak specifically to that on choosing the equipment for your needs?
Well, we all work for Skydio, so who do you think we're gonna? No, this is a big topic, really. I'll let Deepu start.
Yeah, especially if you're doing the patrol-led deployment model. One of the things that you want to do is, and any officer can attest to this, the equipment that you reach for, you want it to be reliable and you want it to be easy to use. Whether it's something on your duty belt, anything in your duty bag, you want it to, every time you reach for it and you try to use it, it has to work, and it has to be relatively easy to use in a stressful environment, like a call out, like a hostage barricade situation, or an active shooter. You don't want the complexity of a 45-step setup process before you can get the drone in the air. It has to be quick. It has to be easy to use. So based on your SOPs and your use cases, choose the equipment that's gonna do the job for you, and it's gonna work every time. The world of drones is continually evolving. When we were selecting equipment, there weren't a lot of choices out there. There was one 3-letter company that was pretty much the only choice. The times have changed. There are options out there. Skydio makes some amazing drones that are very, very quick to deploy, easy to use, perfect for like a patrol deployment, where things that you have to think about when you're using a patrol-led model is how quickly can the officer get the drone in the air, start a live stream and send that video stream back to HQ or other responding units, so they have that situational awareness. So that user interface, how easy is that to navigate in a stressful situation? How quickly can you launch the drone? How easy is it to launch the drone? And you have to think about currency requirements. How are you tracking the amount of times a pilot has flown? You've set usage and currency requirements on your SOPs. How are you going to track that and make sure that your pilots are flying? To make sure they're current with their requirements. So all those kind of lead you to choosing the equipment that's going to work every time. I've flown a whole bunch of different drones. I have to say, not just because I work for Skydio. The reason that I work for Skydio is because Skydio, I saw from the beginning that Skydio equipment, the AI and the autonomy that's built into the drones, just make them really, really easy to use, easy to deploy, and pretty much like a seamless workflow when it comes to live streaming or scene documentation and things like that. And Noreen and Fritz can chime in here. Noreen, like, I'm sure you've used 3D scan, and how easy that is to use compared to drones of previous times.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you talk about choosing the right equipment, think about the equipment that can do all the things you need it to do. You can, with 3D scan specifically, I think the biggest question I was always asked in the crime and crash reconstruction world was, I never know how to take my photos so that I can get a good 3D model from the scene that I capture. And Skydio's 3D scan feature takes all the guesswork out of it, kind of does it all for you, so you don't have to think about overlap and angles and how many photos. And then once you put that through a photogrammetry engine, you have a 3D point cloud of your scene that you can use for reconstruction purposes or any type of forensic analysis. So again, using the equipment that can do all the things that you need it to do.
Yeah, and just to add to that, in fact, we referenced that OKC, the Oklahoma City patrol-led deployment process. That was Skydio, and in there, they're not endorsing Skydio in any way. They're just Skydio customers. And in the webinar, they described why they chose Skydio, and it was specifically, among other reasons, because it was easy to fly. As you know, Deepu, going around and doing demos, our thing is find someone in the crowd who's never flown a drone, hand them the controller, and tell them to try and crash it. And that's really a big deal. It's kind of an eye-opening thing. If you've ever flown a Skydio, you realize, yeah, that makes a big difference. Certainly, if you're going to deploy it to people who aren't drone enthusiasts, they don't have hours of stick time. They're going to be deploying it pretty much in operations all the time. So those nerves are, adrenaline's flowing, and so you want something that you're getting some help on, right? It's kind of easy to fly, it's quick to deploy, and you're not going to crash. That was the selling point, and why OKC, among other reasons, picked it. And so that type of, whether it's Skydio or some other drone, depending on what type of deployment you're going to do, are you going to do indoor operations? Are you going to do search and rescue? Are you going to do accident scene reconstruction and evidence collection? Picking the right kind of drone, that has the software capabilities that you need. It is a big part of it. That's usually where people start. I think if you take one thing away from these 5 steps, is the equipment kind of is at the bottom of it. And people tend to start with equipment. And I mentioned in Chula Vista, we were given a free drone, which can kind of spark the creation of the team. So there's a little bit of irony there, but I think there's a lot of factors to look at before you just decide what kind of drone it is how you're going to operate, which ones offer those best features end to end that will solve your problem based on what problems you have and how you hope to solve them.
I want to give a nod to the last 2 points here. Training and education, first and foremost. Skydio has a whole team of people who have been in your shoes, and so they understand what you're trying to do and how you need to get there. And so having access to people who can help you is incredibly helpful throughout this process. And then integration with existing systems. Agencies are spending lots of money on all different kinds of systems throughout their use in patrol or just in a police department operations, and being able to integrate what you're doing with a drone with those systems is really important, so that you're not kind of, no longer using one so you can use something different, but it's so that they all work together seamlessly to get the job done quickly.
Yeah, so those are great points, Noreen. I'm always in awe about our training team. Like, they're just like fantastic. They're a fantastic group of people. They're really like experts in the Skydio equipment, and I've seen them. I've been at multiple events where we've been doing training, and I've always learned something new every time I'm sitting in on those classrooms. And then the integration part is also very important. Like you said, the drone is going to be integrated into an existing system, right? So a lot of times it's a video management system, or a larger real-time crime center system or something like that. And we do have a lot of APIs, publicly available APIs that you can connect to do your fleet management, to do your live streaming, things like that. Skydio does have ATAC integration, which is fantastic for tactical operations. But yeah, all those things that are things to consider when you're selecting the equipment. Also, how well does it integrate with the systems that you have in place now, and what other. And this is something that, Fritz, I'm sure you can agree, and Noreen, is something like a lot of people don't consider when they're starting a drone program, is all the other things that you need to support the drone, right? The drone program, like what kind of vehicles, charging, battery charging, like fleet management, pilot tracking, and all these different things that you have to consider. So there's a whole ecosystem that supports the drone operation that you'd also need to consider and select wisely as well.
No, that's a great last point. A little bit of a shout out to Axon. I think it really showed the way. With the, early on there was a bunch of different cameras competing to be the body worn camera, and the one that won wasn't the best lens or the best um, feature. It was the overall package, the ecosystem, the best, easiest one to use on a day-to-day basis, the one that you could charge quickly, upload the video quickly, manage the video, share it with the DA and the defense attorney, all of those other things that come with body worn. And so that's kind of what you should look at in terms of the type of drones. Well, not only the drone itself, but all the other features that mean that it's going to be easy for you to implement in day-to-day patrol.
Excellent. We have about 14 minutes left here, and I do have a few questions, and this first one kind of goes into choosing the right equipment here. But the first question is, does Skydio have an entry drone or strictly outdoor platform? So if you guys want to speak to that.
Was that the question? Do we have an indoor drone?
Yeah, like an indoor entry drone or just strictly outdoor?
Yeah, so it's a tough question to answer because our drones fly very well indoors. So if you're not familiar with Skydio, our drones operate, our drones fly using visual navigation. So there are a series of 6 cameras that are built onto the drone that allow it to basically see and understand the world around it and act based on what it sees. So if you're flying in a GPS denied environment, like like inside a stadium or inside a school, or something like that, where there is no GPS available, the drone will fly perfectly fine. It is not designed to be an indoor tactical drone, but it performs very well inside. The only caveat is that because the drone needs to be able to see its environment, if it's not relying on GPS, you need sufficient light. So as long as you have enough light for the drone to operate, so something like, God forbid, an active shooter inside a school, with wide hallways that are well lit, the drone will perform fine in there, but it's not designed to be an indoor tactical drone.
Yeah, we're tactical centric, but there's a lot of indoor operations, as Deepu alluded to, that aren't, middle of the night in a barricaded suspect type. It's because it can fly indoors. It's not relying on GPS. You can do indoor scans, and there's all kinds of new information there from the industry there that needs to fly indoors to take photos and do 3D scans and fly under bridges anywhere around energized power systems. There's all kinds of things that don't have to do with public safety where the drone is actually a perfect fit. But it kind of depends on what you meant by indoors.
Okay, next question. What are your thoughts on flying under Part 107 versus obtaining a COA?
So we could probably do a whole new show on that. Like I said, most agencies, I think, mature agencies, we're talking public safety again, will do both just because they want, just for CYA. But if you're flying under a COA, unless you say I'm flying under a 107, then you're flying under a COA. And now fewer and fewer operations require 107 versus a COA. It used to be that to take pictures or fly a parade or something that was non-emergency response, you'd have, or training even, have to be flying under 107. And I think with the new rulings, all those can be done under a certificate of authorization. So I think you'll see more and more agencies just going solely flying as a COA, because if you can fly under a COA, unless you specifically say this is a 107 mission, you're going to be found to be flying under a COA. So your own internal training and the preparation you've done is going to be relevant. You're not going to be protected by the fact that you passed the 107 test. They're going to be considering you as operational under that COA anyway. So I'm not sure if that's the answer, but that's kind of a little bit of the distinction and evolution of the question.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it, Fred. So I mean, when early on there were a lot of restrictions to operating under a COA, like training or non-emergency type of flights, where you had to fly Part 107. In New York City specifically, the Lance, the grid wasn't active until much later, so we weren't able to leverage the Lance grid either. So we had to kind of use a hybrid system where certain times we're flying under the COA, certain times we're flying under Part 107. Training and things like that would be under Part 107. But I think more and more agencies can and operate under a COA and leverage all the benefits that come with that, and also use that to self-certify their pilots as well. So there are some reporting requirements and things like that that come with operating under a COA, but nothing that's so burdensome that you're not going to be able to run a group with it.
How would you mitigate the drone in every trunk concept and the increase in liability risk?
Yeah, so obviously, I think the question is pointing to the fact that you're no longer giving drones just to a very highly trained, specialized unit. You're taking some more risk by giving it out to people who don't spend hours and hours doing training. How do you mitigate that risk? I mean, risk is a tough subject to discuss because it's so it's hard to define. Police agencies are taking risks all the time. You've got 20-year-olds racing around, 23 or 4-year-olds racing around in a city, lights and siren. They're kicking doors in, they're fighting fires. I mean, the amount of risk in public safety is through the roof already. So drones, thankfully, knock on wood, really haven't raised a lot of concern in that area. You don't have a lot of issues in terms of people retiring from drone injuries, accidents. While bad things can happen at doing anything, and certainly with drones, and we want people to be responsible. At least historically, it's been a very, very low risk for agencies operationally, and certainly much less risk putting a drone up above or sending a drone around the corner than say a canine unit or having a person stick their head around the corner or whatever. So while you may be taking more risk with the drone than you would if you didn't fly them specific to the drone, I think the drone actually reduces everyday operational risk versus other things you could be doing without drones or would have to do without drones.
Yeah, those are great points, and I would also add that it just goes back to those 5 steps that we discussed, specifically developing really robust standard operating procedures that you make sure that your pilots adhere to and they internalize it, and a really robust training program, training and currency program, where you make sure that your pilots are well trained, they know the equipment inside out, they know the policy of the agency inside out, and they're just well comfortable operating the equipment, and if you can do that and you get the pilots to really buy in and take this seriously, you buy down the risk considerably. And the other part about it is the equipment. Again, the equipment that you choose. Having drones that have robust obstacle avoidance, that aren't exclusively reliant on GPS for navigation. All those things can reduce risk, especially when you're operating in urban environments where GPS can be spotty. You reduce a lot of risk of crashes. So training, equipment, and those SOPs can really help buy down that risk.
Absolutely. In patrol-led deployment or a more traditional DFR deployment, have you run into a scenario where the UAS are contractor operated?
So yeah, Chula Vista uses Flying Lions, and there are other companies out there that offer services to staff the rooftop. So I've heard of that. It's not super common. It is more common with DFR than just traditional operations. But yeah, I've seen that in the past, and certainly it's those agencies that are doing DFR might want to use some civilians to staff the rooftop because trained cops, trained firefighters are pretty expensive. But typically you want the drone is there to replace the SME. So operationally, you're going to need someone who understands the job that the drone's trying to do. You don't want people flying a drone in police work or fire work that are experts in drones. You want them to be experts in public safety, and the drone's there to be a tool to put that person somewhere they don't want to be or can't be. So at some point, you're going to have first responders operationally using the drone, or at least consuming the data that the drone is providing. Otherwise, the drone's kind of pointless.
Deepu, this question's for you, so I'm going to test your memory here. What was the training program that you were speaking about earlier?
So we did speak about the Skydio's training program. We do have an in-person. We also have an online training that comes with the equipment. So you can log in. It's a self-paced thing where you just follow the videos, and it walks you through the entire, the entire system, the Skydio system, how to safely operate it, troubleshooting, things like that. So that was one of the things that I referenced, and then the training curriculum. Um, um, that I was talking about was in New York State. We do have the State Preparedness Training Center that does Part 107 training. They do some hands-on flight training as well. So I don't know which one they were referencing, but you could always shoot us an email, and I'll get more details for you.
Perfect. Couple more questions and then we will wrap it up for today. But for those of you, if I don't get to your question, please know that we have your information. We'll reach out to you. You will get that answered eventually. Is Skydio integrated into the Axon Air Drone Sense platform yet?
So we do. So you can do Axon Response. So you can live stream through Axon. There is some integration there. It's not fully integrated with DroneSense yet. So the live streaming part of it, yes.
Do you have any agencies that use your system in conjunction with a crime center or a monitoring center?
So in terms of like a real-time crime center or a...
I assume that's, yeah, what it's referencing.
Yeah, I'm off the top of my head, I can't think of one specifically. I mean, we've mentioned OKC, Oklahoma City. Certainly, they've got real-time crime centers, and their whole goal is to get the drone up and provide that feed to the watch commander real-time crime centers. So, I think most agencies who are considering having a drone operation also see the value in a real-time crime center. They're kind of two the same thing, two peas in a pod. What you're trying to do is get intelligence on those incidents that are happening. A drone is a way to get there quickly, see more than you otherwise would, see it from and share it. And that's what real-time crime centers are: is gathering data, getting that data out to the front line, whether it's personnel checking fixed cameras or the DFR camera feed, getting alerts for ShotSpotter or Zero Eyes or Flock or some of these immediate notification systems, Live 911, other ones that are out there. It's all about intel, and a drone is just a way to access intel. So real-time crime centers generate out of agencies who want to get immediate access to intel and have a team that's there to actually do something with it. So I hope I answered the question. There's a lot of real-time crime centers out there with drone teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just integrations are key, right? You're already using a lot of systems. So how do we just integrate the drones into that to make it more robust and get you as much information as quickly as you can get it? With that said, we are down to our last minute. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for today. To Deepu and Fritz, thank you so much for all of the information that you've provided today. I think this was extremely helpful to those who may be looking to start patrol-led deployment, or maybe just starting in the beginning phases of adding a drone unit to their agency. To all of you that have attended, thank you so much. For the questions we did not get to, again, we will get those to you directly. You'll just have to wait for someone to reach out to you. But we really appreciate you joining us today. And if you have any questions or need anything further, please reach out to any of us.